Hi, this is Maggie. In this video we're going to talk about the scope or visibility of names within a program. A related concept is the rules used to resolve a name to a variable or function. This program is our first example of scope. We have a program with a function called func and some code that is not enclosed in a function. That code has module level visibility. The module is another way of referring to the file. Variables and functions that are defined at the level of the module are visible to all other code in the module unless they are shadowed. We'll talk about shadowing in a minute. The names defined at the module level in this example are func and var. Function names are defined using the def keyword, and variables are defined when they appear on the left side of an assignment statement. Names can also be defined within a function. If so, they have function level or local scope. They are visible only within the function in which they are defined. The names that are visible within func are param, the parameter to the function, and var, and var2, which are local variables. When this program executes, the function func is defined, and then the variable var is defined, and then the program prints in module, and it prints the value of var, which is 10. We then jump to func and pass var as an argument. The value in var, 10, is copied to param. Within func, we define two local variables, var and var2. Now, var has the same name as var from the module scope, so var shadows the variable in the module scope, meaning Python cannot see the var defined outside of the function. It can only see the variable var that is defined within the function. Here we print in func, followed by the value in the local variable var, 0, and then the value in the local variable var2, 0, and then the value in param, 10. We then return to where func was invoked and the program ends. Let's talk for a moment about that shadowing. This relates to how Python resolves names. Let's take this line of code within func in which we print the variable var. How does Python decide what that name resolves to when there are two variables called var in the program? It looks from the inside out. So Python first looks in the inner scope, the scope of the function func. It finds var, so it's done. If there were no variable var here, then it would look in the enclosing scope, which is the module scope, and the name would resolve to the name defined in the module scope. We'll look at another example now. In this example, we have a function called func, a function defined within that function called inner func, and a function called main. So in the module scope, we have two functions defined, func and main. There are no variables in the module scope. Within main, we have no variables or functions defined. Within func, we have the variables var1 and var2 defined, and the function innerfunc defined. Within innerfunc, we have the name var1 defined. The first executable line is a call to main. We jump to main, and the first executable line is an invocation of the function func. Now, Python resolves that name by first looking within the scope of main. It finds nothing defined as func, so it looks in the enclosing scope, which is the module scope, and we see this function called func. We jump to that module where the name inner func is defined, and then var1 and var2, which are given the values 1 and 2 respectively. Then inner func is invoked. Python looks within the function scope, and it sees the name inner func defined within the scope of the function. So that is how the name is resolved, and we jump to that code. Within inner func, a variable var1 is defined and given the value 3. We then print var1 and var2. Python resolves these using its scope rules. var1 will be resolved to the variable defined within inner func because it shadows var1 in func. var2 will be resolved to be the variable defined within func because Python will look first within inner func, find no variable with that name, and so look in the enclosing scope, which is func, find the variable, and print that. It will therefore print 3 and 2. Now, suppose we tried to invoke inner func from within main, or reference the variables var1 or var2. We would get an error. Remember, Python looks in the current scope, also called a namespace. It won't find inner func var1 or var2 within main. So it will then look in the enclosing scope, which is the module scope. Again, the only names defined in the module scope are func and main, so it won't find inner func var1 or var2, and it will throw an error. We'll look at one more example. This program has a really unusual error. We have a module in which we have the names func and var defined. The variable var is given the value 10, and then the function func is invoked. Execution jumps to func, where we attempt to print var. It seems like Python should look within the namespace or scope of func and not find var, and then look in the enclosing scope, find var, and print 10. But that isn't what happens. When we run the program, we see the error unbound local error. Local variable var referenced before assignment. Python is referring to this local variable var, an integer given the value 5 declared after we try to print var. Even though this variable is defined after the print statement, it is part of func's namespace or scope. So Python looks within the current namespace, sees var, but also sees it doesn't yet have a value, and so it can't evaluate it. It's not bound to a value yet, and that's why we get the error. Now, you should practice with scope, because you must understand scope in order to design functions well. Functions should be as independent from the rest of a program as possible. Although there will be exceptions, as there are to any rule, you should follow the rule that Python should never look outside a function's namespace to resolve the name of a variable. If a function needs data to do its job, that data should be passed in as a parameter. Or if it doesn't need to come from another part of the program, it should be a variable that's local to the function. One exception you might consider is constants. If a value is used by many parts of your program and the value won't be changed, you can usually define a constant at the top of the module or file and use it in many functions. But do not consider any other exceptions until you're a very experienced programmer. If you aren't used to writing functions that pass data and return values, this will be a hard rule to follow. but it's impossible to write loosely coupled, abstract, reusable functions if they are dependent on the context of the enclosing scope, and that is why you must practice. When you're very comfortable passing parameters and returning results from functions, and you can predict with perfect accuracy how names are resolved, you're ready to move on.